At API 10.0.0, one database query gets slow. Not down, just slow. By 10.0.2, the API that calls it has no free workers. By 10.0.3, the front end is timing out. Clients retry. Traffic doubles exactly when the system has the least capacity. Then, services that never touch that database begin failing too. One slow dependency has taken down the whole product. This is a cascading failure. And the dangerous part is that every component can behave exactly as designed while the system collapses. So let's build the failure from one request, watch it spread, and then add the defenses that actually contain it. Deadlines, bounded retries, circuit breakers, bulkheads, backpressure, and load shedding. 1. Slowness consumes capacity. Imagine an API with 100 workers. Each worker accepts a request, calls the inventory service, waits for the response, and then becomes free. Normally, inventory replies in 50 milliseconds. Requests flow through. The waiting line stays almost empty. Now, one shard becomes slow. Inventory takes 5 seconds. Those workers are not doing useful computation, but they are still occupied. New requests keep arriving. First 10 workers wait, then 50, then all 100. The API itself is healthy. Its CPU might even look calm, but its finite concurrency is gone. This is the first mental model. Latency consumes capacity. When each request stays in the system longer, more requests exist at the same time. Once concurrency hits the limit, the excess has only 2 places to go: into a queue or into an error. And a queue is not free capacity. It is delayed work holding memory, sockets, connection slots, and often a user who is about to give up. 2. The queue becomes a feedback loop. At first, the queue seems helpful. A brief spike can pass without rejecting anyone. But during a sustained slowdown, arrivals exceed completions. The queue grows every second. Older requests wait so long that they are already useless, yet the system still spends resources processing them. Longer queues create longer response times. Longer response times keep workers occupied longer. Fewer workers become available. The queue grows faster. That is a positive feedback loop. Eventually, the caller times out, but timing out does not guarantee the abandoned work stops. The downstream service may continue running the query. Now the user has received an error, while the system keeps paying for a result nobody will use. This is why overload is not just a lot of traffic. It is a mismatch between incoming work and the system's current ability to complete useful work. 3. Retries can become a self-inflicted attack. Now add the most reasonable line in the entire system. If the call fails, try again. One request becomes 2. If the front end retries the API and the API retries inventory, a single user action can fan out into several downstream attempts. At the exact moment inventory needs less work, every caller sends more. This is a retry storm. It can keep a recovering service pinned under stale demand long after the original slowdown is gone. Retries are not automatically bad. A second attempt can hide a brief network fault or a single unhealthy host. But a retry is a new request competing with first attempts. It must spend from a budget. So the rule is not retry everything. Retry only failures that might succeed on another attempt. Limit the number of attempts. Back off between them. Add randomness or jitter so thousands of clients do not wake up on the same millisecond. And retry at one layer whenever possible, not independently at every hop. For operations with side effects, retry only when the operation is idempotent or protected by an idempotency key. Otherwise, try again can become charge again. 4. Deadlines stop useless work. The first containment boundary is time. A timeout says how long one operation may wait. A deadline says when the entire request stops being valuable. Suppose the user-facing request has 1 second left. Service A should not give Service B a fresh 3-second timeout. It should pass the remaining budget downstream. B might reserve part of that budget for cleanup and return early. Without a shared deadline, each hop can spend its full timeout one after another. The caller gives up, while deeper services continue doing work for a response that can no longer arrive on time. Deadlines make cancellation meaningful. When the budget expires, stop queued work, cancel downstream calls where the protocol permits it, and release the scarce resource. But choose the number from real latency data. Too short, and you manufacture failures during normal tail latency. Too long, and a broken dependency occupies your entire pool. 5. Circuit breakers stop asking a known bad question. A deadline limits one request. A circuit breaker limits repeated requests to the same unhealthy dependency. When calls are succeeding, the breaker is closed and traffic passes normally. When failures cross a threshold, the breaker opens. New calls fail fast instead of waiting for the same predictable timeout. That protects caller resources and gives the dependency room to recover. After a delay, the breaker enters half-open state and allows a small number of probe requests. If they succeed, normal traffic resumes. If they fail, the breaker opens again. The important detail is that a breaker is not a health oracle. It is a local protection decision based on recent outcomes. If every instance opens and probes in perfect sync, the probes themselves can create a spike. The thresholds and recovery timing need randomness and observation. And failing fast needs a product decision. Maybe show cached inventory. Maybe hide one recommendation panel. Maybe accept the order and reconcile stock later. A breaker without a fallback merely turns a slow failure into a fast failure. 6. Bulkheads contain the blast radius. Deadlines limit time. Breakers limit calls. Bulkheads limit shared resources. The name comes from ships. Watertight compartments keep one leak from flooding every room. In software, separate workloads into independent pools. Product search might get its own connection pool. Checkout gets another. Free users and internal jobs might use different queues. One noisy tenant cannot consume every worker needed by everyone else. The boundary can be threads, processes, containers, connection pools, queues, rate limits, or concurrency permits. The mechanism matters less than the isolation. Bulkheads do trade efficiency for safety. A quiet pool cannot always donate all of its spare capacity to a busy one. But during failure, that reserved capacity is exactly what keeps the critical path alive. 7. Backpressure and load shedding keep the core alive. The final defense is admitting that capacity is finite. Backpressure tells producers to slow down. A bounded queue can block, reject, or signal upstream instead of growing forever. This keeps overload visible and prevents unbounded waiting. But sometimes producers cannot slow down, or the traffic is already at the front door. Then, the system must shed load. Reject excess work early, before it consumes the scarce resource. Prefer a quick 503 over a connection that waits 30 seconds and fails anyway. Preserve capacity for requests most likely to succeed, for critical operations, or for customers already in a transaction. Graceful degradation is load shedding with product judgment. Disable expensive recommendations, serve stale cache entries, reduce response detail, skip optional fan-out calls. The goal is not to keep every feature alive, it is to keep the smallest useful product alive. 8. Build the containment stack. Now put the defenses in order. Measure the dependency's latency and error rate. Give each request an end-to-end deadline. Bound concurrency and queues. Retry only eligible operations from a retry budget with backoff and jitter. Open a circuit when calls are predictably harmful. Isolate critical workloads with bulkheads. Apply backpressure where producers can cooperate and shed load where they cannot. Then, test the failure, not just the happy path. Add latency, drop responses, exhaust a connection pool, kill one region. Watch whether stale work stops, whether retries multiply, and whether the critical path keeps capacity. The dashboard should make the causal chain visible: outstanding requests, queue depth, saturation, timeout rate, retry volume, breaker state, and rejected work. CPU alone can look perfectly normal while every worker waits on a slow socket. One slow service takes down everything only when the system lets slowness cross every boundary. Resilience is the practice of drawing those boundaries before production draws them for you. If this made cascading failures click, subscribe. Next time a service slows down, you will know why the blast radius grows and exactly where to cut it.